Hello, everyone, and welcome to This Week in San Diego Soccer History. I'm John Cross, along with Dylan Wilson. And Dylan, how are you doing this evening?
I'm doing all right. It has been a busy week for Dylan, but I'm hanging in there. How about yourself?
Uh, doing all right. Also busy with some other things, but busy in a good way. Um, some family visiting in town, so that's been fun. And also catching up on, well, not catching up, watching a bunch of games on the World Cup. How about you? Are you still following what's going on, at least in terms of game wise?
Yeah, I will have games on in the background usually, if not directly watching.
Yeah, so what now that we're recording this, this is June 23rd, 2026. So we are wrapping up the final day of the second matches in the group stage today. So what's your feelings so far with 48 teams and a lot of teams being in there that wouldn't have been in there, um, in terms of quality of play, anything? What's your feeling about the expanded 48 team World Cup now that we've actually started it?
I would say largely more positive than I expected. There have been some blowouts that I think you could argue discredit kind of some of the smaller teams, but a lot fewer than I was expecting. And some of the smaller debutante nations have fared better than I expected. There have been some, like I said, some rough results, but by and large, I am enjoying the expanded field more than I expected to. I still think it's a little bit silly to add 16 teams just to then go to a round of 32 in the beginning of the knockouts. But it is what it is. That's kind of just how bracketology math works. But yeah, I mean, it's been a fun tournament, and it reminds you kind of what it means to some of these countries that don't always get a chance to participate.
Yeah, I have to agree with you. I have been pleasantly surprised. Like you, I expected some more lopsided games than we've seen from some of these smaller countries. So, in that sense, it has been fun. I have been enjoying the soccer portion of it. And frankly, I think I'm also just happy none of the other shenanigans that we had leading up to the World Cup seem to be dominating headlines in and around the World Cup. We've just been able to have the games right now.
For the most part, yeah,
So
I
that's
would
been
I would
enjoyable.
agree.
Um, but I do have one thing I have decided I 100% don't like, and I'd like to get your thoughts on it, is the switch to head to head as the first tiebreaker in the group stage. Because one of the things I've always looked forward to is that third and final game. It's, to me, always been very intriguing, especially with the tiebreaker rules that FIFA usually uses, which is goal differential to separate the teams, as the first tiebreaker. But now that we're not using that and it's head to head, we know a lot of the people who already are eliminated or have already won the group, like the United States, um, after two games. And I feel like it's taken some of the drama away from quite a few of the final games in the group stage that we would normally see, even in this expanded tournament where we're going to be taking a bunch of third place teams. So curious about your thoughts on that.
I guess I kind of forgot that that was a this year change as well, but I don't mind it so much, to be honest. Especially with like 8 of the 12 third place teams going through. I think it kind of makes sense. Um, and also in a situation where everybody plays each other once, I think it makes more sense in that scenario than it does, say, the way La Liga uses it, where they use head to head as the main tiebreaker, but you have a home and home kind of situation. That can get a bit dicey. I'm not totally opposed. I guess I agree it has removed some of the drama. Like, it is a little bit weird to see the U.S. qualified through already. Um, but there are going to be some great final days. A few of the groups are shaping up like anybody could win it, anybody could go through, or maybe not anybody, but 3 of the 4 teams are still very competitively involved. But
Right.
yeah, I guess I would say my bigger gripe is just that, like I said, 8 of the 12, you know, third place teams going through.
Third place.
Yeah, it's very like, in the same way that like with the NBA now, like 60-70% of the teams make the playoffs, it almost kind of cheapens it. So I would say that is more my problem. But it again, I've been pleasantly surprised. It hasn't really decreased the quality of play as much as I expected that it would.
Yeah, I would say from a sporting perspective, I think head-to-head is probably the fairest way to go as the first tiebreaker. If you tie with someone and you beat them in the group stage, then you should advance. But from a neutral fan standpoint, I think it adds a lot more drama when you have goal differential as the first tiebreaker, because then that head-to-head stuff is not irrelevant because it's usually a tiebreaker somewhere in the system. But that goal differential being the first one, it means there's still a lot more to play for and a lot more at stake in the final game. And in this case, the U.S. could not go into that final game potentially resting players and everything, knowing they won the group, because they could still, at worst, finish second. But even in the U.S. group, because of goal differential, right now it'd be highly unlikely that they wouldn't finish in first. I mean, there would have to be a lopsided win by Australia and a lopsided loss on the U.S. end. But it's still possible. And we've seen some crazy things happen in soccer matches on those final stages. And I like that drama of that final day as a neutral. But I would say, from, like I said in the beginning, from a sporting perspective, it's probably most fair to do head-to-head as the first tiebreaker.
Well, yeah, you don't necessarily love to see when it gets down to like yellow cards accumulated or whatever. Not that it gets there often, but I also noticed it seems like they're resetting the yellow card counts more often than they have in the past. I feel like it used to be one reset like after the quarterfinals, and that was it. And I guess with the expanded tournament, that makes a little bit of sense, but it almost just feels like a yellow card is like not a big deal now, where it used to be, like, oh, you get a yellow card in the first game, you're playing all the way through the quarters, like knowing if you get another, you're missing a game. And that felt like it added a layer of drama that isn't so much there this time around.
Right. Yeah, it certainly will change the way some teams play. But I've already, FootMob does some predictions of what the matchups, because right now they have the U.S. facing Algiers in the round of 32. That was if things were to end right now. Probably not likely going to be their opponent, but could be. But one of the intriguing matchups I saw that I think has a better chance of happening is possible Brazil-Japan matchup in the round of 32. I think there's going to be some pretty intriguing matchups right away in the knockout rounds. Like, not all of them, but there's going to be some good ones where a couple of good teams are going to face each other and could be out very, very early in the tournament.
Another exciting one that could, not super likely to end up being the case, but Argentina versus Uruguay, I think would be a really fun.
I saw that. Yes.
Yeah.
That would be quite a big match. Yeah.
Do you have any unexpected, sorry, just before we jump off, any teams that have impressed you that you weren't totally expecting? I have one in particular that I'm wanting to get to. But
I think, now I'm going to pronounce it this way only because I heard their goalkeeper pronounce it this way, but Cap Verde, I hear people pronounce it all kinds of different ways. And since he pronounced it that way, I'm like, okay, that's what I'm going with. But,
sure.
Cap Verde, especially, just in our group, I'll say the U.S. group, I thought the Australians have played well, but I think I always enjoy the smaller teams and, the ones with less history, and especially debutantes when they come in, and seeing if they could make an impact when they show up and not be trounced. And the flip side of that, I know you didn't ask, but I've been a little disappointed with some of the other 3 CONCACAF teams that had to qualify to get in, haven't done as well as I thought they might. I really thought Panama would show a little bit better than they have so far in the tournament. But
their last games against England
is probably my biggest one.
Yeah, they've been.
Well, I mean,
yeah. Well, I agree. They more than any other team feel like they've got that magic of the cup kind of vibe going on. Just some way, somehow, they've managed to get points, and their final game is against Saudi Arabia. I mean, if Spain and Uruguay draw, they could very well win the group. Well, no, probably not.
Isn't that crazy?
Well, no, because they tied with Spain, so I really have no idea.
Right.
That is pretty wild. Yeah, I will say, yeah, they've impressed me. Some of the bigger teams have kind of disappointed me a little bit. I've not been overly impressed with Germany, even though they won both of their first two games. I don't necessarily see them making a huge deep run. Um, and I will say though, oh, and Belgium, but I kind of always expect Belgium to underwhelm me because that's just what they do at this point. But the team that has really impressed me that I wasn't necessarily expecting is Norway. I could really see them making a very deep run. You know, I don't know how deep their squad is, but that first 11 could beat anybody on its day, especially when you've got, you know, probably the only striker in the world, who you could argue is maybe a better finisher than Harry Kane, Erling Haaland. Yeah, I've been really impressed with Norway. Their fans seem great. I love the Viking row thing. I think that's awesome.
Right.
And then I also Japan I've been very impressed with, and which I expected to be. And you know, in the previous iterations of this podcast, we talked about kind of the Japanese rise of football, and I fully expect that in the next 10 years they could, or not 10 years, next couple of decades maybe, make a real run at the cup writ large. But I'm excited to, you know, I hope that they'll go through. It looks like, so I'm excited to see what they can do in the knockouts as well.
Yeah, I agree. I think this is a tournament where a lot of the giants, as you said, haven't really impressed. I'd say outside of France. France maybe at periods of the match haven't been terribly impressive, but then when they turn it on, they turn it on. And they're the only team I've seen so far that looks like they could make a deep run. But as you know, in any tournament, what happens on any given day is going to count. And
Yeah,
I think any of the big teams can be beaten. And I think a lot of what people consider the middling teams have shown themselves to be competitive. And it's going to be very interesting to see how things play out once we get to the knockout stage. But as we've seen in years past, you'll get a Spain or an Argentina that will lose their first match and maybe look iffy during the group stage, and then pull it all together once you get into the knockout rounds. So I'm eager and excited to get to the knockout rounds to see how these play out and see what some of the storylines are, especially for if any of these debutantes do make it to the knockout rounds. Thereuld be quite a story.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we'll see. This next week should be fun.
Yeah, so let's guess probably time we get into our actual podcast of our San Diego soccer history. But to start off, we have I guess our trivia is what we should get to. So let me go ahead and pull that up on the screen here for those who are watching it in a video format. But we left our show last week and we said in the 2005 U.S. men's under-17 head coach John Hackworth called up these twins from San Diego for the 2005 under-17 World Cup team. And can you name them? So, Dylan, I think when we spoke last time, you had no idea, right, who either of these brothers were that played on that 2005 team. And we had talked about that 2005 team had people in it like Josie Altidore, Omar Gonzalez, and Neven Subotic. All went on to national team careers, two of those with the U.S., Subotic with Serbia. So some big names, and we'll talk about some of that when we talk about this portion, the 2005 World Cup during our main topic here for these particular brothers. And if you paid attention to the title of our show, you should at least know the last names of these brothers. But let me go ahead and pull it up on the screen. The answer to the trivia question from last week is Gabriel and Michael Farfán. They are Chula Vista natives who, as we'll talk about a little later, spent most of their life playing together, not their entire careers, but quite a bit of their careers playing together. And we'll talk about some of the historical milestones they had. So that will be our main topic today. And part of the reason we're doing that story today is because today is their 38th birthday. So happy birthday to both Gabriel and Michael Farfán. I'd be 38 years old today on June 23rd, 2026. All right. I didn't look for any other birthdays since that all tied together. Did you have anything, Dylan, to add in terms of birthdays before we move on to our
I
kind of
don't
current
believe
events?
so. I see that one on our list here, but I don't think I've got any others.
Yeah. I and like I said, that just kind of to keep to the theme, I just really added those to the birthday list. But one quick shout out to Miguel Berry, former University of San Diego and San Diego Loyal Star. He ended up getting player of the match with a 9.3 rating, 2 goals, 1 assist. One of his shots went off the woodwork as well. And Charleston Battery's 5-2 victory over Sporting Jacks, which kept Charleston in second place in the East in the USL Championship. And in following that, as part of the stuff that happened this week with people with San Diego connections, I was looking at some other stuff around Miguel Berry, and when I think about it, it makes sense, but I was shocked to see that Miguel Berry is 28 years old. I really, in my mind, he's still barely out of college.
Yeah, it is funny to think about. I mean, time flies by. It was what, the
Yeah,
21 season was the last time you played for Loyal? So that, it was 5 years
something
ago
like
at this
that.
point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just, it's funny, like you said, how your brain does that. But in my mind, he's still, I remember him playing in college, seeing him play in college at USD, having him come to the Loyal. And then I think it's part of that out of sight, out of mind. So in my mind, I still picture him. It's like when you see relatives, especially younger relatives you haven't seen for a long time. And like, I just have some nephews in town right now. And the last I saw them in person, even though I've seen some pictures, is 5 or 6 years ago. And now 2 of them are as tall as I am. And, they just like, I could pick you up, the last time I saw you, and now you're huge. So I think that's part of the mindset there. But good on him for getting that player of the match rating, and like we do every week, we'll keep kind of keeping an eye out for those people with San Diego connections who are doing well in and around the game of soccer. All right, Dylan, before we get into our main topic, we'll do our trivia. Now, just fair warning for this one, because we always try to tie our trivia back to San Diego, some kind of San Diego connection in some way. And this is one where I really had a hard time finding a good trivia piece to tie into our main story that had a direct connection back to San Diego. So this has the loosest of loose connections. So in terms of answer, and we're going to be looking for a particular player, don't think hard about San Diego players for this one, because it's not one. But we'll see if you can get the answer. So for our in-show trivia question, all right, we want you to name this former U.S. men's under-17 player that should have played at the 2005 under-17 World Championships with the Farfáns, but instead he starred in the 2003 edition, scoring 4 goals as a 14-year-old. So let everybody contemplate on that. It should not be a terribly difficult choice, but it is going to tie into something we're going to talk about a little bit later. So, without giving the answer, do you have your thoughts?
I do.
Dylan,
I actually am
this,
fairly
yeah.
confident I know the answer to this one. Yeah.
Yeah, this one, if you were around, certainly any time of that time period, you should have there really is kind of only one answer, but for that time period that fits it. We've actually had some couple of young players, both on the men's and women's side, that have played very young at 14 years old. In fact, we had someone from the Wave, Melanie Barcenas. She, I think, played on the under-17 team on the women's side when she was 14 years old. So it's not unprecedented, but this was the first time I think we had someone that young playing on the under-17 team. Okay, we'll leave you with that trivia question, and then we will head into our main topic for today, which is the Farfán brothers, which is the answer to our trivia question that we left you with last week. So let's do our little intro, and then before we get started. So again, They are Chula Vista natives. They're identical twins, Gabriel and Michael Farfán, and they have been a part of each other's soccer journey for pretty much all of their soccer lives. They played together in nearly every team from youth to college before, at some point in college, which we'll talk about in a second, they went their separate ways, only to eventually return and end up on the same team at the pro level in Major League Soccer. So tonight we're going to take a deeper dive into the soccer journey of the Farfáns. And before we really jump into all of that, Dylan, any thoughts or comments before we jump into their story?
Not particularly. Just I'm not super familiar, so I had to look and see. And as far as I can tell, they're not related by any stretch to the only other Farfán I know of, which was Jefferson Farfán of Peru. But doesn't seem like there's any connection there.
Yeah.
So
No connection. All right, so let's get started. Farfáns were born in 1998, June 23rd, same day as we are recording this now, June 23rd. So they are 38 years old today. And as we said earlier, wish them a happy birthday. They grew up in Chula Vista. Their father was from TJ, their mom was from San Diego. They played together from very young age in AYSO. They also played on local club teams, first with the Bonita Rebels as they started to advance out of the AYSO system. Eventually, they moved over to the Nomads, where they won the under-14 national championship together. They both, as they went to high school, both initially attended Castle Park High School. They made the varsity team as freshmen, but both players, I think that a year apart from each other, but both players eventually moved on to the under-17 Residence Academy in Bradenton, Florida. So they could train and practice with the rest of the group of people to see if they could qualify and make it to the under-17 World Championships. So they go to Florida. While they're in Florida, John Hackworth is their coach, and he does eventually select both of them to the 2005 Under-17 World Cup team. And as we talked about before, there were several what would become prominent national team players on that team. Josie Altidore, who was actually only 15 years old on that, so he was a young player brought along on the under-17s. Nevin Sabatic and Omar Gonzalez, among some other names that if we went through them, if you followed especially Major League Soccer, you would recognize some of these names. But those are three big ones. I think a lot of people would recognize those names and would stand out. Just as a little side note, even though we mentioned those three because of the careers they did have, none of those three players started a single match. And if they came on at all, they all came on as substitutes, as opposed to Michael Farfán in the same group started all four of their matches they had at the World Championships. And the brother, Gabe, I think he started one match, and I think he came into all of them as subs, if I remember correctly. So they had some decent playing time, and I think again this is another time where you look at under 17s, especially very young players, and not everybody pans out to be super successful who maybe starts on those teams. Some do, but others who are on the bench who don't get much time, they get better a little later on and really blossom and become much stronger players. In that under-17 World Cup, the U.S. was in Group C that included North Korea, Italy, and the Ivory Coast. Michael Farfán would start those first two matches, which were both wins over North Korea and Italy. And Gabriel Farfán came in, he was an unused sub in those first two matches. They both start the third game in the group stage, which is a 1-1 tie against Ivory Coast. The U.S. would win the group. They go to the knockout stage. They face the Netherlands. Michael again would start. Gabe would come on as the late match sub, but they would lose and get knocked out to the Netherlands there in that first knockout round. Now, to my knowledge, this is the first set of identical twins to play for a U.S. men's national team at any level. I couldn't find any record of identical twins playing together at any time with the U.S. men's national team program. I don't know if that's true, but just in the search that I could find, I think they might be the only ones so far. And they only did this at the under 17 level. They did not follow it up at the under 20s, under 23s, or even at the senior level. One of the interesting things about this 2005 World Cup is that Gabriel and Michael were not the only identical twins at the 2005 World Championships. Gambia had a set of identical twins, Saini and Sana Nyasi, and if you follow MLS at all, especially shortly after this, that name should be familiar. And they will come back into our story a little bit later. That's why we're calling them out right now. And Dylan, I'm going to give you one guess, and I'm 100% sure you're going to get this right, as to who was the coach of Australia for this under 17 World Cup.
It would have been
Let's
Mr.
give you
Angelos
one guess.
Postecoglou, yes. And I
Absolutely.
yeah, I won't go any further than this, but if anybody is curious how he ended up losing that job, he had a very famous blow-up interview on Australian sports television that is worth a watch. It's wildly entertaining.
Yeah, they did not get out of the group stage in that one. But I have not seen that. I will have to go.
I can send it to you. Remind me afterwards.
All right. As a side note for all our Mexican fans out there, this was the year that Mexico won the under 17 World Cup, led by silver ball winner Giovanni Dos Santos and the Golden Boot winner Carlos Vela. So shout out to all our friends who follow the Mexican national team, because that was at a time, especially at the youth stages, where the Mexican team on the men's side was really dominating. All right, I know we had you jump in for the coaching question, but Dylan, any other thoughts or comments about this under 17 World Championships that the Farfáns were a part of?
Yeah, two things. First of all, I know that it's not the only time or the first time, but I'm always jarred to see North Korea included in these things.
Yeah.
Not that they don't, not that the players shouldn't. I understand there's lots of geopolitical kind of complications there, but it always just strikes me. So that's one. And two, the Gambia is one of the most countries I'm most keen to visit, simply because it's just probably the most uniquely shaped country in the world. So anyway, that's not super relevant to soccer, but those two takeaways.
Got it. All right, so let's we'll pick up our story from when they wrap up their under 17 World Championships, and they're looking to go to college. Now, both players actually through the Bradenton Academy are actually graduating a year early. And they end up enrolling in Cal State Fullerton, not really known across the country as a soccer powerhouse, at least historically. And their coach, under 17 head coach John Hackworth, was surprised at the decision, knowing they both could have gone to a college with an historically stronger program. And it appears from some of the articles I read that the twins didn't really fully understand the whole college application process and where to go, and they kind of just ended up somewhere that would take them and somewhere fairly close to home. So being in Southern California at Cal State Fullerton did get them closer to San Diego, and they go there and they play together again for the first couple of years. And up to this point, like 2 years in, they've pretty much played on every team they've ever been on together. They're both that good. And, again, like a lot of things, fortunately play slightly different positions. Gabriel usually plays as an outside back, and Michael usually plays in the midfield. But after 2 losing seasons at Fullerton, they both decide to leave, right? But for the first time in their careers, they decide to take different paths. Michael decides to transfer to the University of North Carolina, and Gabriel signs with Club America and joins their academy system. So that's what they kind of do for the next 2 years. And Michael's senior year, he's a semifinalist for the Herman Trophy. He and the University of North Carolina team make it to the Final Four of the College Cup, which is being held in Santa Barbara that year. they would end up losing to Louisville. And just again, as a side note, this is the year that the Akron team, coached by Caleb Porter, won the title. This was a year after his initial flirtations with going to Major League Soccer. He ended up staying, they win a national title, and then he eventually goes to, actually, I don't know if he goes to Major League Soccer. I think he does the Olympic team first before he goes to Major League Soccer. But that's back when he was still coaching University of Akron. But Gabriel is there to watch his brother Michael play in the College Cup, and John Hackworth, their old coach from the under 17 teams, is now on the coaching staff of the Philadelphia Union. John Hackworth, Gabriel Farfán get to talking, catch up, and John Hackworth, kind of asks, "Where are you right now? What are you doing?" And he works out a deal to get Gabriel to come try out and come out in the spring in the preseason with the Philadelphia Union and see about, if he can make the team and get a contract there in Major League Soccer. So those are Gabriel's plans. Michael's going to wait and see, because he's rated pretty high in college, see if and where he might go in the draft. And before we go on a little further with that, Dylan, I'll give you a chance to jump in with any thoughts or comments before we talk about the 2011 MLS draft and where Michael goes.
I don't really have anything to add. I do recall that College Cup year. That was kind of around the time of my life when soccer was really coming onto my radar, and I was, trying to watch all of it that I could. I don't know if I probably didn't watch it live, because anyway, that's not important. But I do remember Caleb Porter, and I remember there was a time when he was supposed to be like the American Guardiola, like changing the
next
game.
Big coach, yeah.
Yeah, and to be fair, he did go on and win a couple cups, but anyway, we'll get to
that. Yeah. So we're going to pick it up in early 2011, and we're at the MLS draft. And it ends up that with the 5th pick in the 2nd round, Philadelphia Union take Michael Farfán. So now both brothers are at least in camp together here at Philadelphia. And as we know in Major League Soccer, getting drafted does not mean you're going to make the team. And getting a tryout with the team does not mean you're going to make the team either. So they're both there for preseason. They do both end up making the team. And when they do both get contracts, and Gabriel, I think, was the last to sign his contract just before the first game of the season, working out some final details. But they both sign, and when they sign, they end up being the 10th set of brothers to play for the same MLS team, which I was actually floored by, that in 2011, just 15 years into the league, they were already the 10th pair of brothers, not brothers in the league, brothers to play for the same team. I was just a little surprised by that. So 10th pair of brothers. They were the 2nd pair of identical twins to play in Major League Soccer. Any guesses to who the first twins were? Because we mentioned them a little bit earlier in the podcast.
Oh, the Niasi, I want to say.
Yeah, our Gambian twins from the same 2005 World Championships, Saini and Sana Niasi. Saini, I think with New England, came in 2007, and then Sana in 2009, I think with Seattle, came into the league. But they both got into the league, and they became the first twins to play in Major League Soccer. But with Gabriel and Michael being on the Philadelphia Union, they made MLS history as the first set of twins to play for the same team. In March of that year, for the March 19th, which was opening day, Gabriel Farfán makes his professional debut with the Philadelphia Union. Michael does not get into the game, but he does a little bit later in early April. He makes his professional debut with Philadelphia Union in a U.S. Open Cup play-in round against DC United. And I'm just going to make a quick sidestep here to remind some people in terms of the Open Cup, because how the qualification changes and has changed quite a bit over the years. This was back when MLS only had 8 berths, into the Open Cup, and there was a qualification process to see who earned those 8 berths. So the 6 of those berths were split between the East and the West, and based on top 3 finishers in each division from the prior year. But the last 2 spots, there was a play-in round for the rest of the teams to see who qualified. So in a way, still every MLS team qualified. They just didn't jump into the MLS proper. Just like every other league, there was a qualification process, which I actually kind of like. I don't see MLS doing that now with all their complaints about schedule congestion, but this is how we did it in 2011. Philadelphia would not qualify for the US Open Cup, but in this first match, I think they actually lost this first match in penalties to DC United, but this is where Michael makes his professional debut. And before we continue on, Dylan, do you want to jump in with any comments or thoughts or anything about Open Cups?
I guess I didn't know that was the case back then. Since I've become more, in tune with the Open Cup, that was not how it was done. But yeah, I mean, that sounds like more fun and more incentive, really, I guess, to give it a go. But whatever, that's clearly, not the view anymore.
So Michael makes his professional debut in that US Open Cup qualifying match in early May 2nd. Both Farfán brothers would get their first MLS start together, making them, again, setting MLS history, the first set of identical twins to start an MLS match. And to this day, still the only set of identical twins to start an MLS match for the same team. In fact, I think they might be the only twins, period, fraternal or identical, to start for the same team. We've had a couple different instances, both later with the Farfáns and with the Nyasis, of playing team brothers playing against each other. But this was the first time for a team that twins had started the match for the same team. A little bit later in May, on the 21st, Michael would score his first goal in a 2-1 win over the Chicago Fire. And a week later, Gabriel scores his professional goal. And then in July, there was a friendly, I forget what it's called, the World Football Challenge that they used to do, where they bring over teams, but sometimes they'd play MLS teams and sometimes they just play other, like, European teams. But Philadelphia Union played Real Madrid. Madrid ends up winning 2-1, but the goal for the Philadelphia Union was scored by Michael Farfán. And if you get a chance to go look at that, it's the 2011 World Football Challenge between Philadelphia Union and Real Madrid. It's a great chip goal from top of the penalty box. Michael receives it, he turns, he sees the goalkeeper out, just lobs him perfectly into the goal. It's a great, great goal. But if you get the chance to check that out, you should go and look it up. And have to say, that 2011 season was really the highlight for both players at Philadelphia. In 2012, we'd start to see a change. Michael would continue to get lots of good playing time. He actually gets named to the MLS All-Star team. But Gabriel starts to see his playing time decrease over the season. And eventually, as we get into 2013, Gabriel ends up getting traded to Chivas USA in May of 2013. And yes, traded. This is back when Major League Soccer, even though they respected the transfer windows for international transfers, domestic contract players still could be traded and moved around at any time in the season. And sometimes I think back and I think, God, we were still doing that in 2011, making trades in the middle of the season. And also that Chivas USA was, I guess, still around in 2013. I thought they were not around at that point, but I think they made it all the way to 2014 before they finished up. But he ends up with Chivas, and this change marks, really, once they finish their time in Philly, the last time that the brothers would play together, and they really start going in different directions on teams. And after their time at Philly, they both, like, that's where the success seemed to really happen. And then they start to bounce around to some other teams, which we'll talk about here in just a second, and have trouble sticking with a team. And this is one of those things where I think, yeah, having the right coach and a coach that believes in you and the right kind of system is great, you know, as a player, but being a competitive professional athlete is so difficult and challenging that when you mess up that combination, it doesn't always work for you. So Gabriel, after he goes to Chivas, he ends up going to Chiapas in Mexico for a couple of years. He comes back. He's in the NASL for a couple of years from 2016 to 2018, both with the Cosmos and then Miami FC. And he ends up retiring in 2018. Michael, in 2014, tries his hand at Cruz Azul, has a 3-year contract, but ends up coming back to MLS after 6 months. I think he played once and scored in his opening match. He got in and then never really saw the field after that. He bounced around from DC United in 2015 to Seattle 2016, and he ended up retiring in 2017. So they both really kind of shot up the ladder real quick, became professionals, performed well on the stage initially, and then kind of bounced around to some teams before they eventually bowed out of professional soccer and retired fairly early. So 2018 and 2017, we talked about they're 38 now, so, you know, getting close to 30-ish, 28 to 30 in that range, and they were wrapping up their careers. And then to kind of close out, and then we'll get some final thoughts from you, Dylan. The last I was able to find anything concrete on Michael Farfán, he was doing something in relation to property management and living a very rough life out on the Canary Islands. and Gabe Farfán, though, has stayed local. He is actually, and some of you may know this already for following SDFC, he's part of the SDFC Right to Dream Academy staff as the emerging talent scout. So that's where they are now. Gabe's certainly keeping his hand in soccer and staying locally. And Michael, I saw a couple of different things. People make comments that Michael had a lot of ideas about traveling the world and doing things. So maybe that's what he did, and living in the Canary Islands. So good on him.
Yeah.
All right, Dylan, that kind of wraps up our shorter segment compared to the ones we've had recently. But any thoughts or comments about the Farfán brothers?
Yeah, I mean, first, just what they're up to. For all of my kind of misgivings about SDFC and the Right to Dream Academy, one thing I will say they've done very well that even I cannot begrudge them is include local people. This is not the only, former pro or somebody involved that I've heard of that is now working at the academy. I think that's fantastic. I have a lot of respect for that. And kind of, as you said already, even if he didn't end up seeing the whole world, if you go on a world trek and land yourself in the Canary Islands, I think you've done something right.
It could be worse.
I've never been, but it's a place I'd really love to go. They're under the domain of Spain still, right? Like there's even a top flight club or second division club playing there, Las Palmas, I think. So yeah, again, you could do a lot worse. Not that far from Cape Verde.
Yes. Yeah. That would be quite the thing. I don't think I would pass that up if I had a chance.
No, not at all. It is too bad that they both kind of their careers tapered out the way they did. It's another instance of, had we had a more robust kind of footballing pyramid infrastructure in the country, maybe they could have found their feet somewhere else. So it's another kind of, I actually get in this conversation a lot with people with regards to like gridiron football, American football. If for no other reason, it's a good thing that you're getting these like USFL or whatever they're calling them these days. It's good because it allows these players an opportunity to prove themselves or kind of, end the career on their own terms. And so, yeah, I'm sure they would have a lot more to say about it were they here, but it is always too bad to see someone taper out before they, you feel like they necessarily had to.
Yeah, and Gabriel, he did play down the NASL, as we said, and when he left was when the NASL ceased operations. That seemed to coincide with his retirement. So I'm sure the NASL folding had, I would imagine, a lot to do with, do I keep trying at a even lower level or go somewhere else, or do I just do something else with my life here at this time? And I don't think that's terribly uncommon, especially in the United States with a lot of our players that will, like you said, our lack of a fuller pyramid and places for people to play, especially if you've gone to college and you have a college degree and something you can fall back on. I think that gets to be a point where a lot of people are starting families and, they're like, okay, my soccer days are over and now I'm going to move on to the next phase of my life. And while as a fan, I might wish they had more time, I imagine there's quite a few of these players. I don't know if this falls with the Farfáns or not, but are kind of ready. Like, I did it, I had fun, and now I'm going to move on to my next stage. And it may have nothing to do with soccer in my next stage. All right, let's get to our trivia question, the answer to it that we had at the beginning. So let me pull that up again. Our question was, name the former U.S. men's under-17 player that should have played at the 2005 under-17 World Championships with the Farfáns, but instead starred at the 2003 edition, scoring 4 goals as a 14-year-old. So, Dylan, you have a guess, you said?
I do, yes. Mr. Freddie Adu.
Absolutely. That would be Mr. Freddie Adu there, who was on top of the world in American soccer around that time as a 14-year-old.
Yes, he sure was.
If
you'll allow me a soapbox for... Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yes.
No,
let me get this little bit of trivia,
then
and I'll let you go. The reason I tied this in as the trivia question this time is because I completely forgot that Freddie Adu had come back to Major League Soccer after Benfica and played for a little bit. He actually played with the Philadelphia Union. He was on that 2011 team with the Farfáns that year. So when I saw his name pop up on the roster, I was like, no way. Like, I don't remember him being back in Major League Soccer. I just forgot about that whole part. So that was, I told you, the loosest of loose connections for our trivia question this time around. But go ahead, get on your soapbox.
Yeah, I do remember Adu at Philadelphia, because again, that was kind of around the time I was really starting to take my interest in soccer very seriously. But yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm not going to say it's unfair or people shouldn't do it, but Freddie Adu finds himself on the butt of a lot more jokes than I think he really deserves. Yeah, he didn't become the star we all thought he would, but that happens, first of all. Like, that just happens, full stop. But then when you consider the way that MLS as an organization, as a business, put the weight of its future on a 14-year-old and
14-year-old, yeah.
Right. He didn't even, there was a great video about this I can find if you or anybody else is interested, but he barely even had time to practice, by his own admission, because of his media obligations and, the way the MLS was treating him as the face of the league. I am firmly of the belief that he would have gone on to have something a lot closer to the career that we all expected, had MLS not put that kind of pressure that could crush an adult on a 14-year-old.
Right. And
I think that in all the jokes about Freddie Adu, MLS as a business gets off scot-free a lot, and I find very unfair. I think they bear a lot of the weight for crushing this most promising at the time ever U.S. talent. And I don't think a lot of people ever think about it enough to come to that conclusion, but I think when you really sit down and look at the whole timeline of events and the facts of the situation, it's pretty undeniably true that MLS ruined this kid's life, basically, to further their business ambitions. And so I need that to be said whenever Freddie Adu comes up, because again, it feels very unfair the way He's been the butt of every joke for the last 15 years, but MLS never gets any of that,
Yeah, I agree. And I think also a lot of lessons were learned because he wasn't the only young player in the league at that time. After that 1999 under 17 team where we had so many players, Landon Donovan, DeMarcus Beasley, Bobby Convey, all these players from that 99 team also started coming into the league. But I think there were a lot of lessons learned from just, these are still children. They may be good enough to play on the field with adults, but when you start putting them in locker rooms with adults and, adults doing adult behavior things around kids, like it just so many things that in 2026 we would say really crosses the line. When we think about young players now, they typically, when they go to teams, they have their own dressing areas. They don't dress with the other adults. They have a advocate basically along with them, making sure that they are not being taken advantage of as a child, which, as you said, with Freddie Adu and many of these other younger players, the league certainly did. And like a lot of teams and a lot of groups, as soon as they were done with them, those players weren't useful to them anymore. MLS, like a lot of employers and businesses, are happy to move on to someone else to fill that void because, especially in a sport like soccer, there's so many people desperate to break through and make it to that level that some of these people just get discarded. And I agree with you 100%. I think he may not have been the best player at 28, even if he had a lot, there was a lot more guidance and control over his situation when he was 14, 15, 16 years old. But that should have happened, and he probably would have had a much more successful professional career and U.S. men's national team career if he'd had that, because he clearly had the talent. But
and even
yeah,
outside of
he
the
was
soccer,
used and abused by the league.
Even outside of the
And the
soccer,
sponsors.
yeah, 100%. I obviously don't know the guy, but you hear people talk about like, oh, he had attitude problems and things, and it's like, yeah, he probably is legit traumatized for the rest of his life for the pressure that was put on him in his teenage years. And again, I'm going to go off again, so I'll stop myself. But I just don't think that aspect of it gets talked about enough, because try to remember being 14 and you could barely handle the pressure of your own life, let alone this burgeoning business. Like I genuinely would not be surprised to find that still, wears on him, later in his life, 20 years, 25 years later. Like it's a real shame, honestly.
There was a great podcast, like 6 episodes that Grant Wall did about Freddie Adu called Prodigy or something like that. Listened to it when it came out several years ago, but if you haven't heard it yet, for anybody out there, and you have a chance and want to listen to it, and Freddie Adu is a big part of the interviews of that, talking about his experience and everything else. But Grant Wall does a fantastic job with that podcast. But I highly recommend it for anybody who might be interested in looking at it both from Grant Wall's perspective as a journalist, and then also, since a significant portion of those interviews come from Freddie Adu and come from a lot of the people who worked and were around him as a young teenager in Major League Soccer. And it's pretty, some frank and blunt questions by Grant Wall, and I think some pretty frank and blunt answers by Freddie Adu, acknowledging things where he messed up too. But it was good. I found it very entertaining. So if you get a chance to go find that, I highly recommend it. Okay, let's go and start wrapping up our episode here. We do have one local match that I do want to highlight. We have the final of the UPSL Southern California division that is coming up. The winner is going to move on to the UPSL National Championship tournament that they do, which is single game knockout rounds. So whoever wins this match coming up will do that. The Nomads, which finished the season in first place, are taking on Flash FC, which finished the league in 6th place, but have managed to work their way through the playoffs. They're an Orange County team. So we got San Diego County versus Orange County in this final. It is going to take place this Sunday, June 28th at 4 p.m. at Canyon Crest Academy. It will not conflict with any World Cup matches. So there is one match as we start getting to our group stage matches here coming up. Our final group stage match, there's only one. Let's see, am I getting my things wrong? Maybe we're starting our first knockout phase, I think, on that Sunday. I think that's our first knockout game. But that's at noon. So at worst, it'll be over by 3, unless there's some kind of weather delay. So it should not conflict with any World Cup match. 4 p.m. this Sunday, Canyon Crest Academy. The Nomads versus the Flash FC. The winner moves on to the UPSL Championships. I'm going to try to make it out there if I can this Sunday. Try to move some things around. So hopefully we can get quite a few people out there to see some good UPSL action before they head into the playoffs. And if the Nomads do win, we should have at least one more game locally, or a few more games till they make it to the Final Four. They should be able to keep hosting as long. Well, actually, I don't know where they rank compared to the other teams, but it's a good chance that they will be hosting some matches moving forward. So, Dylan, any chance you might be able to make it out there?
Probably not. I got a pretty busy weekend this weekend, unfortunately. And to be honest, I mean, I know it's 4:00, but anything that's going to keep me out of the house after 5:00 on a Sunday is a pretty tough sell for me usually. So
yeah. All right. Well, I'm going to see if we can round up some people and head on out there for that match on Sunday. And I think that wraps up pretty much our episode here. So I want to remind everybody, This Week in San Diego Soccer History is brought to you by the San Diego Soccer History Society, a grassroots organization looking to uncover and preserve San Diego's rich soccer history and culture. If you like what we're doing, please help spread the word. Please, here on YouTube, like and subscribe so we can get these videos in front of other people who are interested in San Diego soccer history. Engage in our community section here on our YouTube page, or follow us on socials at Blue Sky. We're at sdsoccerhistory.org. And if you really like San Diego soccer and soccer history, join our volunteer team of researchers and help us out. You can reach me at john@bigpinedigital.com, and we will get you connected and have you jump in and help us out with the podcast and any of the other research that we're doing. All right. Hope everybody enjoyed this week's episode on the Farfán brothers. We'll be back next week with another episode where we're going to look at the time that 2 San Pasqual High School graduates started in a U.S. women's national team match, which, I mean, might as well put it up. That's basically our trivia question. So the trivia question we're going to leave you with is, on June 30th, 2001, so that date should help clue some people in here. So June 30th, 2001, 2 San Pasqual High School graduates started a match for the U.S. women's national team. Can you name both players? Now, one of those players, I hope this is like one of those where one should be super obvious and easy to most people who followed women's soccer and local people here in San Diego. There's like one super obvious answer, and the other one, I'll be pleasantly surprised for anybody who can get the name of the second person. So, Dylan, without giving any of the answers, do you have any idea of who at least one of them might be?
I'll have to sit and have a think about it because I feel like I probably could come up with it, but I guess there's the obvious guess, but I'll leave it till next time.
There is one obvious, and it probably is the obvious guess for most people.
Yeah.
But the second one, that's the one I'm going to be super interested if anybody can figure out and know that one, because not only that match and that series of time, but the other person is really going to be the focus of our podcast next week. So that's the trivia question we're going to leave you with. Dylan, I know you kind of said you have your thoughts about the trivia question, but any final thoughts about anything else before we close out and say goodnight?
Well, anything. No, I'm joking.
Yeah, anything.
Yeah,
It's
I mean,
open.
no, I didn't know about. I mean, I think I'd come across the Farfán brothers just kind of in my soccer watching over the years, but I definitely didn't know they were identical twins. Although I guess maybe that's just because I never like. It's one of those things where you see one on the camera and then you see the other, and you just kind of think it's the same person until you realize it's actually not the same person.
Right.
But yeah, it's always super interesting to learn about those sorts of things. And it's cool that they're from San Diego. That's if I ever find myself out at the Right to Dream Academy, I'll see if I can't pop in and recommend this podcast to Gabe.
All right. What fascinates me about their story is how often they played together. That it was a choice, certainly a lot of times, but then also professionally just worked out that they ended up back together again at the Philadelphia Union. But how much of their career was spent together playing with your brother? And by all accounts I've read, seems like they got along great. So, good on them for being able to pull that off, because I think once you start getting, I mean, one, you both have to be very good. You both have to play different positions that fit a team. Even when you start getting into the youth club area, I could see, you start distinguishing, or maybe I'm not on this particular team, I'm not able to get playing time for one of them, so I'm going to go play with this different club team while you play with, club A. So just pleasantly surprised how much they were able to stay together through the majority of their soccer playing careers from youth to professional. I think that in itself is kind of a neat story. Not just two brothers who played soccer and were twins. They really played together and helped their teams be successful on the teams that they were on together.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's definitely an element of like twins like kind of rely on each other a lot. I feel like in the handful of identical twins I've met in my life, there's definitely like a synergy between them that's more so than just like normal
Right.
brothers or sisters, right? But as to your point, that doesn't necessarily guarantee they'll be pros on the same team. Like that in and of itself is pretty remarkable.
Yeah, pretty impressive. All right, Dylan, any other thoughts? Or are we ready to close out?
No, I mean, I think I said all I needed to about Freddie Adu, so I'll leave it there. I did find that podcast, though. I've already added it to my download list. So,
all right, great. I'm interested to hear what you think about it. All right, well, that wraps it up for us. Don't forget, for anyone listening out there, send in your answers to this week's trivia question. You can do it here on our YouTube page, or you can do it through our social media on Blue Sky at sdsoccerhistory.org. All right, that's it for us. We'll see you next time on This Week in San Diego Soccer History. Good night.